Kyle shifted the cereal in his bowl and twisted his curly black hair. I don't get it. Why did we have to leave Inglewood for a dingy place like this? The boy grew tired of the small town his parents dropped their life in the city for. Black Diamond had been everything he knew it would be. A conservative and old-fashioned coal mining town that got stuck in the 80s. Black Diamond. What a stupid name, Kyle thought to himself. It was like an old block of cheese, left to rot and remain undiscovered. The boy's father slammed his hands on the kitchen table.
Are we gonna have this talk every day for the next 2 years?
Kyle's father picked up the keys as he made his way to the door. Why couldn't I stay in Inglewood with Mom for the rest of summer? Or even live with Aunt Faye until I finish high school at least? Kyle sighed and melted into his chair. His father looked back at him.
Because she's gonna need room in the moving van for when she brings our stuff here. This isn't permanent, Kyle. We'll be back in no time, and in a better neighborhood.
Yeah, if we can even survive living in a shitty town like this. How could you put Mom and I through this?
Don't start with me, Kyle. Do you want our family to be far away from each other? Look at your friends. Do they have fathers keeping everything together? I didn't think so.
Kyle's father adjusted his hard hat and made his way out the door. Something wasn't right with this town. Kyle couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe it was the fact that it was in the middle of nowhere. The stillness of this place left a feeling of unsettlement in Kyle's mind. It was different from walking down a dark alley in the city. Out here, there were more than just people to look out for. Kyle continued to walk down his neighborhood, kicking a small stone every couple steps. The distance between houses was much longer than he was used to, further cementing the feeling of loneliness. A trail of smoke from the distant coal mine shrouded the gloomy skies. As he turned the corner towards his new home, he noticed a small crowd congregating at a nearby house. It was a yard sale, and a decent one at that. If he had arrived an hour later, perhaps that wouldn't be the case. Kyle sifted through the clothes, picked up a few pieces, and made his way to the table with collectibles and random stuff. And then he saw it. Hidden in a leather case was an old film camera, a Canonet QL-17. I picked her up on my first trip back home, 1978, Tokyo. Kyle turned around to see a middle-aged Asian man with a pleasant smile. So, it's an original, Kyle replied in disbelief. You've kept it in good condition. Any light leaks? You really know your way around cameras, eh? The man grinned and continued to move some boxes around. I had some work done on it last year. There's a label in the back. Kyle turned over the camera and reached for the cash in his pocket. How about 70 for the clothes and the camera? Deal. The man shook hands as they made the exchange. I'm Andy, by the way. What's your name, kid? I'm Kyle. My parents and I moved here from Inglewood a couple weeks back. Andy began to carry the remaining boxes into his truck. Most of them looked like office files. It was all too organized and uniform. One could tell Andy liked things a certain way, and only that way. The man laughed to himself and turned to Kyle. So, what brings you to a place like this? We're saving money for a home back in the city. Believe me when I say, I don't even want to be here. Kyle hesitated as they both looked at the distant smoke from the coal mine. There's something weird with this town. Wait, you know about it too? Andy's skin became pale as a ghost. You've seen the coal mine, haven't you? Haven't you? Kyle looked back at Andy in puzzlement. Hold up. What are you talking about? My dad works there, but... Andy's body shivered as he slowly began to back away from Kyle, his voice trembling with fear as he began muttering broken phrases. Your father works. Oh God, it's happening again. It's just as I thought. The harvest is upon us. What harvest? Kyle replied. The coal mine has been operating for over 50... Before Kyle could finish his sentence, Andy rushed for his keys and jumped into his truck, fidgeting to insert his keys in the ignition. You need to get your family out of here, kid. People like us aren't welcome here. Andy clamped his shaking hands on the steering wheel and began backing out of the driveway. Wait! Kyle shouted as he began chasing the vehicle. You can't just bounce after telling me something like that. What's going on in this town? The window on Andy's truck rolled down as the distance grew further. The man gave Kyle one final glance and shouted, They're watching. It was dark when Kyle returned home. He was shaken, but more so disturbed by the strange encounter with the man. More questions arose from the chilling answer Andy gave him. They were watching. What was the old man trying to tell him? Kyle placed his camera on his shelf and slowly began to drift to sleep. But for a glimpse of a second, Kyle could have sworn he saw a shadow by his window slowly fade into the night. Kyle awoke the next day to find that his father wasn't home. Strange, Kyle thought to himself. His old man was usually getting up at this time. Still in his morning haze, Kyle stumbled into the kitchen. On the table was a plate of sausages and eggs, and under it was a note.
Work's picking up, and I'll be spending more time at the mine. There's a 50 by my nightstand if you want to order pizza later. Love you.
Pfft. He can't even apologize in writing. Kyle huffed to himself as he made his way out the door and headed to the local convenience store. As he walked into the shop, he could already feel eyes on him. Kyle understood that the townsfolk here weren't used to seeing colored people, but that didn't change the fact that it was mildly irritating. He made his way to the clerk at the counter, where an older gentleman with a pot-belly and silver hair sat on a wooden chair.
Can I help you there, young man?
Hey, I'm looking for some film for my rangefinder camera. I'm thinking 100 or 400 ISO in 24 exposures. Kyle pulled out the camera from his bag.
Aye, that's a great camera. They call it the poor man's Leica camera, you know. I'd go Kodak Gold 400, as your shutter speed only goes up to 1/500th of a second.
The old man squinted at the camera for a second, and then looked up at Kyle.
Where did you get this camera? The black edition's pretty hard to find.
I bought it here at a yard sale, said Kyle. I've never shot with a rangefinder before. Thought I'd give it a go. As he opened up the camera, he noticed the roll of film was still inside, all winded up. Kyle was shocked that he didn't catch it the first time he opened the camera up. The old man lent his hand out.
Tell you what, I can develop that film for you. I'll even do your next set for free, if you hand it over to me.
Kyle slightly withdrew. Actually, I do that myself. Thanks for the offer, though. The old man's voice was no longer insistent. He slowly began to take on a mildly demanding tone as the conversation continued.
Kid, I've been doing this for years. Your photos are gonna come out overexposed if you don't leave them with me.
The old man inched in.
Hand it over.
Kyle stood firmly, placing his money on the counter and putting the camera in his bag. I'll take the Kodak Gold 400. The old man sighed, reluctantly passing him the film and giving Kyle his change.
Hi, feel free to come back if you change your mind.
As Kyle walked out the store, he heard the old man sigh and muttering to himself.
You're playing with fire, kid.
Kyle continued down the wooded path to his house after his photo walk. What was up with that crazy old man? Kyle thought to himself. It had only been 2 days ago when he bought the camera, and 2 words lingered in his mind. They're watching. Although Andy seemed a bit off the hook, he was definitely right about one thing. The strange town and the people who called it home definitely had something to hide. But there was another thought that lingered in Kyle's mind. Something he caught notice of for a while now. It was the faint sound of twigs and branches snapping behind him in conjunction with his footsteps. The steps were intentionally muffled and slower than his own pace. Kyle stopped and turned around, only to see nothing. He was very sure of it now. Someone or something was following him. He hightailed it out of there and took an alternate route home. As Kyle made preparations that evening, he thought about the store clerk and what Andy said. There was definitely something in that roll of film that no one was supposed to see. Kyle turned off the lights and went to work in the dark room. One by one, he soaked the prints in the solution bins as the black and white images faded into view. The first 8 were simply too dark. The images weren't exposed properly to catch any sort of detail. Kyle slumped in disappointment, but continued on. Then finally, on the 9th picture, the image of a rocky settlement slowly faded onto the print. A feeling of uneasy excitement rushed over him as he proceeded to grab the next exposure. The next 2 images showed walls of stone and dirt, but something bothered him about it. There appeared to be a black substance that was smeared all over the walls, though one couldn't tell what it was through the black and white images. As Kyle dipped the final print in, the feeling of sheer terror overcame him. In the photo was a long-haired malnourished man with surgical incisions on his stomach, crouched down in a cage. There were others like him in the photo, lined up in shipping boxes, like animals. They were alive, barely, but the shattered look in their eyes showed that they may as well have been dead. Kyle dropped the photo as the realization began to settle in. These were the photos that Andy took of the coal mine.
Please leave your message